Hey guys, today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the card game of cribbage. So cribbage is a fairly simple game. It just takes a little bit of explaining and then you have to play it a little bit to get the hang of it. So there are two main parts to the cribbage game, the cribbage board and then the deck of cards. So I'm going to go over the cribbage board first. As you can see, this cribbage board is made out of wood. Most are made out of wood or plastic, but each cribbage board is basically the same. They're each divided into segments of 5 peg holes that add up to 120. And then there's also the final peg hole, so there's 121 holes total. You have the starting area, which is used to hold your pegs until you start the game. And then you have this back section that can just hold extra pegs for you. So, as well as the cribbage board on the bottom, which I won't show because I don't want to flip it upside down, there's a little slot that you can hold your pegs in and just keep them safe. So when you're transporting your cribbage board, you don't lose them. So you just need the board and then 2 pegs per player. And then we'll move on to the deck of cards. So here I just have a standard bicycle deck of cards. Inside, before you start playing, you're going to want to remove the jokers and then any additional cards. And then you're just going to give the deck a good shuffle. With any any card game I know of starts, you got to shuffle the deck. Just give me a second here. And I'd shuffled these previously, so they're shuffled pretty well. All right. So then, how you start a game of cribbage? First, you need an opponent. I don't have one, so we're gonna make pretend. So player 1 is gonna start by cutting the deck. So how we play cribbage, low card goes first, or deals first. So player 1 cut a 2, and then player 2 cut an 8. So player 1 will go first. Player 1 is gonna shuffle. Not too well. I mean, it's already shuffled pretty well. So you don't need to shuffle it a ton, but just to mix up those cards a little bit. And then you're going to want to deal 6 cards to each player. 4, 5, 6, 6. All right, perfect. So in cribbage, the goal of the game is to get to the finish hole before your opponent. You can do that through getting 15s, runs, pairs, or occasionally suits. Suits don't come up very often, but it is important. And there are a few other ways to get points, but I'll go over those a little bit later. So, as you can see my hand here, I have a King of Diamonds, 10 of Spades, Jack of Clubs, 6 of Spades, 5 of Hearts, and then 7 of Spades. So what I like to do is I like to organize my cards based on points. So basically, as I mentioned before, you're trying to find points so you can peg. So, and I had mentioned runs. So actually, this is a pretty good hand. In order to get a run, you have to have 3 in a row. So I have 5, 6, 7. That's a run. And actually, 10 Jack is not a run. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. But this is an alright hand. So what you have to do is when your hand is dealt, the person dealing gets what's called a crib, and it's essentially a second hand that allows the dealer to get a few extra points because they are at a disadvantage over the turn. So since I dealt, well, of course I dealt because I'm the only person here, but since I'm player 1, I get the crib. So I have to find the best 2 cards to take out of my hand. So it leaves me with the most points in my hand while also giving me a good potential to gain points in my crib. So when you're first learning cribbage, a good rule of thumb is you're trying to avoid, if you're putting cards into the crib and it's not yours, you're trying to avoid giving your opponent points. So like I said, the name of the game is you have to get 15s, runs, or suits, or pairs as well. So basically, since it's my crib, I am going to want to, I'm going to put my 10 and my king in the crib. This leaves me with a run of 3 and then 15-2 for 4. So that's a total of 6 points. And then also in my crib, I have a 10 and a king. So if they were to throw a queen and a jack in there, I get around a 4. Or if they were to throw a 5 or a combination of cards that would add up to 5, I'd also get more points. So I'm trying to maximize the amount of points, point potential in my crib. So then my opponent will look at their hand and they'll do the same thing as I had just done, and they'll do it while you're doing it as well, so it'll flow much faster. So their hand is pretty good as well, actually. So I'm gonna throw this in here, not knowing that they have what they have in the crib. So this is what I like to do is I like to set the crib off to the side just so there's no confusion in play. So that's their hand. This is my hand. Before you start playing cards, you have to cut the deck one more time. So this would be the opponent who does not have the crib would cut the deck, and then you would flip the card that's on the top of the deck after it's cut. So it's an ace, and then you put it on top of the deck. And this is the card that both players can play with over the course of the counting phase. So then now this is the playing phase. So the playing phase is when you and your opponent reveal your hand using single individual cards, so one at a time, basically. So then the person with the crib goes second, so the turn player 2 would go first. And the goal of this is it allows both players to gain a couple extra points over the course of a hand. So same thing with the hands and the crib, you are looking to make 15s, runs, or pairs. So unfortunately, turn player 2 has a not the best starting hand. So so when you're playing, like I said, you want to avoid making 15s, which is very easy to do with this hand because a 5 and a 10 make 15, a 6 and a 9 make 15, a 7 and an 8, and you have both a 7 and an 8 in hand. So unfortunately, if they have this is almost half the deck right here. If they have a 5, 6, 7, 8, they can make a 15 or make points out of it. So that's not 1/4 of the deck, but that's that's like a 25% chance that they're going to be able to make points off the starting hand. So unfortunately, that's how it goes. So you're going to want to play a little more tactfully and probably play the 10 first to try to bleed out their lower cards so you can try to stick them later with another mechanic I'm going to talk about. So turn player 1 has a 5, so that's going to be 2 points. So turn player 1 is going to end up being the blue stripe or the black pegs. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your back peg. You always move your back peg. So you're going to move your back peg 1, 2. All right, and then it goes to turn player 2's turn. And then they're going to play down a 7, and then turn player 1 is going to play down. So this is 15, so then the count goes up. And I probably should have explained that a little bit better, but essentially when you're in the playing phase, you're trying to get to 31 without going over. So he played down a 10, so I'm just going to go back a little bit here. So turn player 2 played a 10, turn player 1 played a 5, so that's 15, and then turn player 2 played a 7, so then 7 plus 15 is going to be 22. And then from there, you can't play. So basically, when you're at 22, so like I said, you can't go over 31. So you can play anything that's a 9 or lower. So he has a 7. So then that's going to be, 29. So 29 for 2 because 7 and 7 are a pair. So then turn player 1 is going to take 2 more points. And then if you cannot play without going over 31, it's called a go. So essentially, that means, like I said, you can't play anymore. So you say go, and then if I cannot play anymore, which I can't because I don't have a 2, you then this hand or this play phase is done, and whoever was able to get closest to 31 without going over, which would be turn player 1, which is me, you get an extra point for the go. And then the other player would start again. They would start with a 9. Then I would play 6 for 15 for 2. And then they would play an 8, getting them to a 23. and I cannot play without going over, so then they would get a go, so they would get a point, and then you would play the final card for the last point of the play phase. And that sounds really confusing, and it kind of is, but you need to just practice with it and get more fluent. And the more you play, and it's really important, when you learn to play cribbage, you really want to play with somebody so they can help you realize your mistakes. Cribbage it sounds complicated, but once you play it, it becomes very simple, and it's basically just an adding game. So then after the play phase, you move on to the point counting phase. I'm going to go over this very quickly because I'm running low on time here. So the person who doesn't have the crib would count first. So they have a 10, 9, 8, and a 7. So that's a run for 4. 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 4 points. The 7 and an 8, it's 15. So that's 8 points total. And that's about it. So 8 points total. That's pretty good, honestly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they move to there. They're done. That's their turn. They're done for the turn. And then turn player 1. Excuse me. It's gonna count. So they've got a 5, 5 and a 10. So that's 15. And then you also have the run here. So 15 for 2. So then 1, 2, and 3. That's 5 points total. Nifty little thing. If you have a jack that's the same suit as the cut card, which you can't, which I'll move a little closer. It's actually 1 additional point. So right now you have a total of 6 points, and I believe that's it. Yep, that is it. So the turn player 1 gets 6 points. All right. So that is the counting phase, and then you move on to the crib. So in this crib, you can see the 2 cards that I gave, and then the 2 cards the opponent gave. And actually, there are no points here, which is perfect. That's exactly what the opposite. That's what my opponent would want, is for me not to have any points. If there was a jack in here, I'd have points. If this cut card was a 2, I could add 2 and a 3, and then I'd have 5, and then 5 plus any 10. That's a lot of points. So and that's just sometimes how it goes. Sometimes you get really good cribs, and sometimes you don't. And it's really luck based. So no points. So I'm gonna hand that over to there. And then you take every face up card, and then you reshuffle back into the deck. And that is essentially 1 hand of cribbage. And you're just gonna keep doing this until you get to the finish. Pretty standard game. Like I said, it can be a little complicated at first, but with practice and a little bit of guidance, anyone can play cribbage, and anyone can be good at cribbage. It's mainly a luck game, to be fair. It really depends on what you're given in the hand and what's in your crib. There is definitely a little bit of skill in knowing what cards to play and when. So there is, it's not solely a luck-based game. There is some skill to it, but not as much as other games out there. So hopefully this was helpful. I know it was a little confusing, so I do apologize. Maybe play through the video again if you had any other questions that you didn't fully understand. So, all right. Hopefully this was helpful.